Chapter 65 of The Golden Bough. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. The Golden Bough by Sir James Frazer. Chapter 65. Balder and the Mistletoe. The reader may remember that the preceding account of the popular fire festivals of Europe was suggested by the myth of the Norse god Balder, who is said to have been slain by a branch of mistletoe and burnt in a great fire. We have now to inquire how far the customs which have been passed in review help to shed light on the myth. In this enquiry it may be convenient to begin with the mistletoe, the instrument of Balder's death. From time immemorial, the mistletoe has been the object of superstitious veneration in Europe. It was worshipped by the Druids, as we learn from a famous passage of Pliny. After enumerating the different kinds of mistletoe, he proceeds, quote, "In treating of this subject, the admiration in which the mistletoe is held throughout Gaul ought not to pass unnoticed. The Druids, for so they call their wizards, esteem nothing more sacred than the mistletoe and the tree on which it grows, provided only that the tree is an oak. But apart from this, they choose oak woods for their sacred groves, and perform no sacred rites without oak leaves, so that the very name of Druids may be regarded as a Greek appellation derived from their worship of the oak. For they believe that whatever grows on these trees is sent from heaven, and is a sign that the tree has been chosen by the god himself. The mistletoe is very rarely to be met with, but when it is found, they gather it with solemn ceremony. This they do, above all, on the 6th day of the moon, from whence they date the beginnings of their months, of their years, and of their 30-year cycle, because by the 6th day the moon has plenty of vigor and has not run half its course. After due preparations have been made for a sacrifice and a feast under the tree, they hail it as the universal healer, and bring to the spot 2 white bulls whose horns have never been bound before. A priest clad in a white robe climbs the tree, and with a golden sickle cuts the mistletoe, which is caught in a white cloth. Then they sacrifice the victims, praying that God may make his own gift to prosper with those upon whom he has bestowed it. They believe that a potion prepared from mistletoe will make barren animals to bring forth, and that the plant is a remedy against all poison." Close quote. In another passage, Pliny tells us that in medicine the mistletoe which grows on an oak was esteemed the most efficacious, and that its efficacy was by some superstitious people supposed to be increased if the plant was gathered on the 1st day of the moon without the use of iron, and if when gathered it was not allowed to touch the earth. Oak mistletoe thus obtained was deemed a cure for epilepsy. Carried about by women, it assisted them to conceive, and it healed ulcers most effectually, if only the sufferer chewed a piece of the plant and laid another piece on the sore. Yet again, he says that mistletoe was supposed, like vinegar and egg, to be an excellent means of extinguishing a fire. If in these later passages Pliny refers, as he apparently does, to the beliefs current among his contemporaries in Italy, it will follow that the Druids and the Italians were to some extent agreed as to the valuable properties possessed by mistletoe which grows on an oak. Both of them deemed it an effectual remedy for a number of ailments, and both of them ascribed to it a quickening virtue. The Druids believing that a potion prepared from mistletoe would fertilize barren cattle, and the Italians holding that a piece of mistletoe carried about by a woman would help her to conceive a child. Further, both peoples thought that if the plant were to exert its medicinal properties, it must be gathered in a certain way and at a certain time. It might not be cut with iron, hence the Druids cut it with gold. It might not touch the earth, hence the Druids caught it in a white cloth. In choosing the time for gathering the plant, Both peoples were determined by observation of the moon, only they differed as to the particular day of the moon, the Italians preferring the first, and the Druids the sixth. With these beliefs of the ancient Gauls and Italians as to the wonderful medicinal properties of mistletoe, we may compare the similar beliefs of the modern Aino of Japan. We read that they "like many nations of the northern origin, hold the mistletoe in peculiar veneration. They look upon it as a medicine, good in almost every disease, and it is sometimes taken in food, and at others separately as a decoction. The leaves are used in preference to the berries, the latter being of too sticky a nature for general purpose. But many too suppose this plant to have power of making the gardens bear plentifully. When used for this purpose, the leaves are cut up into fine pieces, and after having been prayed over, are sown with the millet and other seeds, a little also being eaten with the food. Barren women have also been known to eat the mistletoe, in order to be made to bear children. That mistletoe which grows upon the willow is supposed to have the greatest efficacy. This is because the willow is looked upon by them as being an especially sacred tree." Thus the Aino agree with the Druids in regarding mistletoe as a cure for almost every disease, and they agree with the ancient Italians that applied to women it helps them to bear children. Again, the Druidical notion that the mistletoe was an all-healer or panacea may be compared with the notion entertained by the Walos of Senegambia. These people "have veneration for a sort of mistletoe which they call tob. They carry leaves of it on their persons when they go to war as a preservative against wounds, just as if the leaves were real talismans." The French writer who records this practice adds, "Is it not very curious that the mistletoe should be in this part of Africa what it was in the superstitions of the Gauls? This prejudice common to the two countries may have the same origin. Blacks and whites will doubtless have seen, each of them for themselves, something supernatural in a plant which grows and flourishes without having roots in the earth. May they not have believed, in fact, that it was a plant fallen from the sky, a gift of the divinity?" This suggestion as to the origin of the superstition is strongly confirmed by the Druidical belief, reported by Pliny, that whatever grew on an oak was sent from heaven, and was a sign that the tree had been chosen by the god himself. Such a belief explains why the Druids cut the mistletoe not with a common knife, but with a golden sickle, and why, when cut, it was not suffered to touch the earth. Probably they thought that the celestial plant would have been profaned and its marvellous virtue lost by contact with the ground. With the ritual observed by the Druids in cutting the mistletoe, we may compare the ritual which in Cambodia is prescribed in a similar case. They say that when you see an orchid growing as a parasite on a tamarind tree, you should dress in white, take a new earthenware pot, then climb the tree at noon, break off the plant, put it in the pot, and let the pot fall to the ground. After that you make in the pot a decoction which confers the gift of invulnerability. Thus, just as in Africa, the leaves of one parasitic plant are supposed to render the wearer invulnerable, so in Cambodia a decoction made from another parasitic plant is considered to render the same service to such as make use of it, whether by drinking or washing. We may conjecture that in both places the notion of invulnerability is suggested by the position of the plant, which, occupying a place of comparative security above the ground, appears to promise to its fortunate possessor a similar security from some of the ills that beset the life of man on earth. We have already met with examples of the store which the primitive mind sets on such vantage grounds. Whatever may be the origin of these beliefs and practices concerning the mistletoe, Certain it is that some of them have their